Well, trials and tribulations, I've called it, and we've had our reading from James 1, which talks about consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. So, I'm sure you're all happy to have trials and tribulations, aren't you? Of course you are. Would you like some extra? Well, none of us actually enjoys setbacks. Of course we don't, we can. I mean, at the moment, I was so pleased about having all of our lighting replaced with LED lights, so these bulbs last forever, well, nearly anyway, many years. So that's going to take away the task of changing tubes, as well as saving us money. And then I was in the creche room, we turned the light on in there last Friday week, and flick, that's not working. So we had to move everything, go elsewhere. And then I came into this morning, and the one behind the curtain here, that's also decided to stop working. Those are minor trials, those are minor setbacks. But there are, of course, major trials, major setbacks, major frustrations that come to all our lives. Nobody said that giving your heart and life to Jesus was going to give you an easy life. It doesn't work that way. There are still going to be trials. James says, consider it pure joy, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance, and let perseverance finish its work, so you may be mature and complete as we go on in life. It is a series of trials, it is a series of setbacks which we have to learn to overcome without losing faith. So what trials of faith have you had? Typical trials that come to us all are bereavements, accidents, catastrophes. Bereavements either do one of two things in my experience. Bereavements either shape faith or reinforce it, or even bring people to faith. It is much in the hands of those who give succour to the bereaved, to lead them through the bereavement and reinforce faith, or try to bring faith forwards. This is why I really don't have any time for funeral celebrants. I think funerals should be taken by ministers of God. I have been to a humanist funeral, just the once. I never want to go to one again. It was an utter nothing. So there's bereavements. Bereavements are all going to be trials. A trial, especially, I mean, the usual bereavements we expect. We expect children to outlive their parents. What about parents who have to bury children? That is a terrible, terrible shock and bereavement. People talk about accidents and they say, why does a good and loving God allow these terrible accidents to happen? They often say this if there's a plane disaster, a train disaster, a coach runs off a road. Well, for a start, God wasn't driving. It's an imperfect world. People who build aircraft, trains, buses, whatever, are always striving to make them as safe as possible. But people make mistakes. The people who pilot will drive them make mistakes. Accidents will happen, no matter how much precautions, how many precautions we put into it. So that's the first thing I'd say. God wasn't driving the plane. God didn't build the plane. But sometimes from these accidents, there can come some good. I'm going to talk about two aircraft accidents. Both of these aircraft went down in the river. Flight 90 in 1982 went down in the Potomac River, and there were 79 people aboard, including the crew, and only 5 were saved. It just broke up. But then I'm going to draw your attention to Flight 1549 in 2009, which had just taken off from LaGuardia Airport in New York. There was a bird strike on one of the engines. They lost power, and the pilots had to make really a split-second decision. Could they turn round and make an emergency landing back at the airport? If the aircraft came down over the top of New York City, of course, not only would that be a disaster for everybody on board, it would be a disaster for everybody on the ground as well. So the chief pilot, Captain Chesley Sullenberger, Sully to his friends, made the decision to bring the aircraft down on the Hudson River. It was in the news, you may recall, they made a film about it as well, of course. Now it's very hard to bring an aircraft down on water. Extremely hard. You absolutely have to get it perfect. If a wing dips, you cartwheel the aircraft and break it up. If you come in at too high an angle off, it'll break the tail off. Of course, if you go in too fast, it'll just all break up on the water. I mean, I'm sure everyone at some time in their life has dived into water and belly flopped. Well, they've actually doing that with a 50-ton aircraft. But he made a perfect landing. Everybody got out. So, these things do provide a chance for us to witness and acknowledge heroism and skill. Of course, after all the accolades, they did try to pin the crash on the captain, the pilot. That was the work of the devil, of course. Unfortunately, it didn't succeed. If any of you lack if any of you lacks wisdom, James continues, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, that it will be given to you. Seek wisdom from the source. My little notes here have got wisdom with a capital W. There's the wisdom of the world, and there's the wisdom of God. And of course, the wisdom of God is based on the fact that God is all-seeing and all-knowing. So which one's going to win there? It takes time and it takes maturity in your Christian journey to learn to lean on God rather than the conventional wisdom of the world. James reminds us to believe but not doubt. We have to be patient. Things happen in God's time. I've been praying for my operation on my sinuses to come through, and I kept praying and I kept praying, and nothing seemed to be happening. Other people have prayed for me as well. Still nothing seems to be happening. And one of my big worries was that I'd eventually get my appointment and it would be while I was in holiday in Zambia. But that's really the wisdom of the world, isn't it? But I have persevered in prayer, and I have got my pre-op appointment on the 21st, and I will be able then to tell the nurse I'm away from such and such and such and such. But also, I've been offered an appointment at Canterbury, which is actually more convenient because Alice works in, I said Canterbury, didn't I? Maidstone. Because Alice works in Maidstone. That means that she'll be able to take me and pick me up. We are human, and we do tend to default to human wisdom, but we've got to be careful. Yes, if you have any project, you should work towards it. You should do everything that you can to make sure it will be successful, but then give it up to God. If God wills it, it will happen. If he doesn't, it won't. Don't be disappointed. Just try and find out what he actually wanted you to do in the first place. I was talking with Ray this morning, and he related a story to me which actually fits so nicely. I'm going to relate it back to you. Ray and Marion had just got married. They had to put a deposit down on their flat, that's where they were going to live together. They've had to pay for the honeymoon, and just before they go off on the honeymoon, he gets sacked. So he hasn't got a job. So they come back from the honeymoon, of course, moving into the new flat, no job, and Ray went to the Labour Exchange, as it was in those days, and got a better job. That was the Lord's work. And he tells me that every time he's moved from one job to another, it's always come as a surprise, hasn't it? That he just walked into the next job. Well, this is the Lord looking after his own. Things look difficult, but rely on the wisdom of God. James finishes that little section there by saying that when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all they do. These are the wind-blown people. Japanese have a word for it, actually. You may have heard of the Ronin. These were samurai who no longer had a master. And Ronin means wave men. So they were blown hither and yon. They didn't have a purpose. Some of them did good, and many of them ended up as bandits. I prefer another word. I prefer ditherer. You and I'm sure, have all met lots and lots of ditherers. People who cannot make up their mind. They seem to have no purpose. They'll start off saying, well, we ought to do this, that, or the other thing, and then somebody else has a word, and they change their minds. I have had a master, or an art headmaster, who was what I would call a ditherer. He went with whatever the last person said to him. So you never knew where you were. They have no wisdom of their own, and they are unwilling to rely on the wisdom of the Lord. The next section of James is talking about believers in humble circumstances and the rich. All who work in the fields of the Lord, all that work is of equal value. Doesn't matter what you do. Are you a prayer warrior at home? Do you do little jobs for your neighbours? Do you do little jobs in church? Are you one of those people, I know a few, who start conversations at bus stops and manage to get a few words of the Lord in there as well? Do you serve your community in other ways? Christine won't mind me saying that she serves the Lord in serving the community with her work with the library and going out to people, bringing them books and giving them company. And she will be the first to admit that it serves the community, it gives other people joy, and it gives her joy as well. So working in the fields of the Lord is its own reward. We are reminded, I am reminded of the flowers of the field. It's one of my mother's favourite expressions actually, the flowers of the field. We are like the flowers of the field. We come, we bloom, and we are cut down. That's human love. Elsewhere, we are reminded that the flowers, in the words of the King James, are arrayed in their splendour, greater than Solomon's. We can all shine in our own way. The rich that James is talking about are those who love money, who are obsessed with money, or with status. They still exist, and there's lots and lots of people out there right now who don't have a lot of money but are still obsessed with status. Following fashion, following the influences of social networks. These are the people that James is talking about. And if they can't give up the things of the world, they won't receive the blessing. I am minded to point out that, especially in the 19th century, there were many very wealthy Quakers who founded very successful businesses and put that money to charitable work. They're not the rich we're talking about. We are talking about those who are obsessed with wealth or status. And it reminds us that those who work in the fields of the Lord will be blessed with the crown of life. When tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. No one is tempted by God. That's rationalisation. We do things, often enough, all of us, that are not actually of God's will, but which are really of our will, and then we rationalise it as being God's will. I can think of examples over my 8 years as a church secretary where church discipline was held to be paramount. It's my job to support the minister, of course, even if I did think that that shouldn't be paramount. And it did lead to rifts which were not necessary. I can think of a church that is seeking to minister now. I've spoken to them a few times. I've even spoken to them or addressed in passing the issue of new ministers. They are absolutely definite that it's got to be a man. And on one occasion, I have said to them, actually, you know, your next minister is waiting somewhere, and it might be a man, or it might be a woman, and it's God's choice, and if it comes to your choice or God's choice, which one do you think is going to win? Well, they have invited me back, so obviously I haven't insulted them too much. As I did with one church I preached at, well, I finished my sermon, and if you haven't got the fruits of the Spirit, you're doing something wrong, and they never invited me back.
Obviously, you were right.
Sometimes rationalisation leads to complacency, and there's always that urge to keep on doing things as they've always been done. Me, I like to shake things up, probably too much, but there is an urge to keep doing things the way they've always been done. That can lead to trouble in church as well, arguments. But we need to win those arguments graciously and with love, and through prayer finding God's wisdom. Don't be deceived, James says. My dear brothers and sisters, every good and perfect gift is from above. Remember that. Every good and perfect gift is from above. And no matter how dark the days get, there are perfect gifts. You're one of them, young lady. Children are a perfect gift. But it doesn't have to be rather big things in life. There are so many little things in life to see. The wonder of a butterfly's wing is the gift from above. Good friends, sharing a meal together is a gift from above. And it all leads to the ultimate gift, which is the gift of life. And remember, as James says, he chose to give us birth through the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruits of all he created. Jesus was a sacrifice for all of us to justify us. It is our duty to sacrifice our lives to the Lord as well.